Hi everybody, Adam Harris here. So this is being recorded for Monday the 24th of March, the week commencing 24th of March. Let's have a look at the economic calendar for this week. So what I'm curious about, I really want to see what happens with US figures this week. So really looking to see if there's any significant drops in home sales. If there is also obviously curious about the UK CPI, would like to see that hold steady or improve. Then also really curious to see what happens with the GDP. So if there's a shift in that, plus initial jobless claims, if we see a rise, I'll compare that obviously with the UK to see how we're doing there. And then finally, I think I'm curious to see what the PCE price index, if there's going to be any responses there. So US news is more for me right now, just monitoring, seeing if there's any impacts from the current administration. Any changes there. Otherwise, always just curious to have keep an eye on the UK to see ideally that it's holding steady. So that being said, let's go to the charts. So here we go. The VIX calming down a little bit actually after the last couple of weeks, coming back down towards those lows. You can see again on that monthly starting to come down. So my point here is that the VIX is often touted as this clue that the market starts to lose its mind, and there's always this expectation that it's gonna spike, just as there's always this expectation that the next market crash is always going to be happening in the next few days. So just highlighting here that although we saw this potentially pull back into an area where it might continue up, it actually has continued to push down. So for now, there are no red flags here. Right, dollar index. Dollar index finally starting a little bit of a retracement here. So this looks particularly bullish to me at the moment. This I see more likely as a weekly retracement. So for now, I expect the dollar to head back up towards the next level of resistance around about that 105 area, and then potentially continue down. It was just very overextended. Would have been nice to see it do a slightly deeper pullback. We'll see if it can break above this level, then I would expect it to move higher. But so far, it's looking a little bit overextended and starting to look as though there's signs of a retracement within this weekly downtrend. We'll see if that's going to be the case. If this level holds, obviously then it could work the consolidation out to break low. But for now, it's looking at a little bit more bullish. And therefore, if it breaks through this, I expect it to move up towards that 105 level. Have a look at euro dollar. So euro dollar coming back down towards 107, at least the nearest level of support. Could very well find support to continue up. But this uptrend on the daily is done. We're now looking at a potential weekly retracement. Okay, then have a quick look at GBP USD again. Also here, still holding at the moment, equal lows over here, so it's more, but it has lost this uptrend. So again, we're still looking at, to me, much more likely either a consolidation or a pullback, but it could be a very short-term or narrow pullback. Dollar yen. Starting to look more and more bullish. We've got a high low here. We haven't broken this high over here, but it is looking more and more bullish. Again, that weekly here, hinting at signs of a stronger dollar because, again, we've seen GBP head lower, euro head lower, dollar yen head higher. Dollar Swissy. Also here holding where it is. Again, I want to see if it holds with these levels of resistance. Should we break above that, I would expect it to move back up towards 0.89. Let's call it 89. That'll do fine. Dollar CAD as well, just no clear direction at the moment here. You could see just no direction. So complete indecision, spinning top or doji candles. We got wicks below, wicks above. We have a gravestone doji here. There's just no clear direction, although it is overextended. It looks very much for now as though it's just going to stay the path. In fact, if you look at it from this direction here, you've sort of got a series of lower highs, and coming up this way, you've got a series of higher lows. So it's very much a wedge formation, which is classic indecision. Moving on to gold. So gold finally doing a bit of a retracement on the daily. We do have this bearish divergence. Normally what this hints at is that at some point in this future, we're going to get either a consolidation or a correction. But for now, that weekly not looking too bad. The monthly not looking too bad either. So I'm going to lean towards us taking another move to the upside this coming week. We'll see though if it double tops and ultimately where we are by the end of the week. Crude oil. Pushing up a little bit higher here as well. Strong historical level of support, very, very strong. And so for now, I do expect it to battle that level, even though the longer term pressure is very much to the downside. We'll see. So this week, looking to see this move up a little bit. Have a quick look at the global indices. So the Dow testing this level of support as resistance. You can see a lot of buyers stepping in here. So a lot of people asking whether this is a buy the dip scenario. I think it's a little bit too soon to tell. Not saying it isn't for sure, just saying it's a little bit too soon to tell. Really need to see that market close back up above that level of support. And for now, again, as I said, it's still testing that level of resistance. The monthly here having pulled back into a really good area. So this isn't a bad place for it to turn around. However, I'd like to see, we'll have to see how this finishes because September we had a really bullish candle and it would be unusual for that to happen now. It could happen. However, I'd prefer for us to let off some steam and then have April come in and look bullish and then see that as the turnaround point. The same here for the S&P. Also, you can see just not really a lot. I was going to say something here to those of you who day trade, if you guys are, or just even swing trading, if you have found over this last week and the week before that, if you have found that you have had a higher number of losing trades, that is very much likely due to this complete indecision that is across every single asset class, possibly with the exception of gold. Every single asset class here is just swinging wildly. We've had just 5 or 6, depends on which chart you look at, but pretty much just sideways motion across that. And so that's been wreaking havoc for day traders. Okay. So just in case you have been experiencing that, that is not unusual. That is due to the just ridiculous market conditions at the moment. So again, here we're a little bit exposed, sort of overextended to the downside. This 50-period moving average is actually now very important. If we can get back up above that, then absolutely we're starting to recover. But for now, I would expect to see some resistance show up there. The NASDAQ as well below that weekly 50-period moving average. These are usually the earliest signs of a correction. So I want to see, or if we're going to get a deeper, longer-term correction, I want to see what happens there. But just look at this complete garbage. So again, if you've been trading all the way back to the 10th of March, which is the last, wow, that's going to be almost the last 14 days, almost 3 weeks, you would just get chewed up and spat out. It's just garbage. You can't trade that. So really, we're waiting for the market to make a decision, sort of more medium term and longer term. But for now, I'd expect some move to the upside here, but I really want to see how this resistance holds out if the markets manage to push right through that. The Russell 2000 back well within its range doesn't necessarily bode well. This hints at more likely kind of staying back in that range. We'll keep an eye on that one. The FTSE, on the other hand, has obviously ended this uptrend, and now it's trying to decide if it should do a deeper correction, a weekly downtrend. And watching it here on the weekly here, it looks okay for now. It's relatively not overextended. You can just see a lot of weakness and exhaustion showing up here in the price action. And for now, I expect this to attempt to either stay where it is or continue to push higher. Let's have a look at the DAX. So the DAX definitely showing some weakness here. Let me just show you this. These last few candles, you could just see it's really battling here, not really closing much higher. So the close is actually staying around this area. Wicks below here, saying there's a lot of buying below this, but it is not able to push that market any further. So ultimately, this is hinting towards a bit of a correction that's going to happen at some point soon. But based off this price action, it could still be several weeks away. It would be really good for this to let off some buying pressure, come down towards that 20,000 mark. And it's just forming a bit of chaos. So you can see the complete difference in structure from what it was like a few weeks ago to what it's been like recently. Continued bearish divergence. I would be super, super cautious on this. It is hinting at either a consolidation or a correction. And as I said, a correction down towards 20,000 would be very good for it. All right, let's have a look at Bitcoin. So Bitcoin slowly but surely edging its way to the upside. So what does it mean for me? Visually, tells me there's just a little bit more buyers than sellers here, but it's not super strong. It's in a really good area for it to ultimately find a bit of a base here. So we keep an eye on this again throughout the where we are by the end of the month. Don't forget, of course, that next week the clocks change in the UK, which means the US sessions will also be offset by an hour, which means for those of you in the UK, it will be happening an hour later after the clocks change next weekend. All right, so obviously the US clocks have changed ahead of us. Now we'll be catching up to them next week. So a bit of a retracement here. I want to see again if we find that resistance. I'd find it tricky to believe that if everything else is taking a hit, that somehow Bitcoin is going to come out on top, but we'll just follow the charts and see what they say. Ethereum here in a relatively strong downtrend, broken through support last couple of weeks. I want to see if we can get back up above that level if we stay within the range. This could ultimately just end up being, this is a range now, but it could ultimately end up just being a failed breakout of a range. Okay, so I've just marked the range there for us for future reference. Actually, I'll bring it down a little bit. How about that? And then we can see that's where the range is. So we're still potentially going to come back in that range. We'll see if they have a good week this week. We could see a bit of a boost. All right, let's have a look at the Mag 7. So the Apple's obviously come back in within these moving averages. And again, it's also going to test this 50-period moving average. So I think the theme this week so far is going to be how we cope. Where will we be by the end of the week? How much higher will we close? Will we manage across the board sufficiently to close above the 50-period moving average? In other words, to kind of allay the fears, because this is really one of those early signs of whether we're about to go into a bigger market correction, is if we can't get back up above that 50-period moving average. All right. And the thing is, this could be about a 4, 5, 6 week process, so it could take a while. We're not just going to know this immediately, but this week I will definitely be keeping an eye on that. Okay, look at Amazon as well, right into a nice area here where we could potentially find support. And again, we could ultimately, these blue areas that I highlight are usually where I would expect price to pull back into before continuing upwards. And we've let off some steam on the monthly, which, ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you is a really good thing, to let off some steam on the monthly. We've needed it for a while. We should have had it in September. We didn't have it in September. This is what's happening now. And so the real question is, are we going to be able to reverse back or change course from here? Still a little bit too soon for me. I would like to think that at earliest it'll be April, but let's just see how it ultimately plays out. Here, again, Google back into these moving averages. We'll see something here. I've noticed that the quality of Google search has kind of weakened a bit. I'm not sure what your thoughts on that are. It seems to me that was the core product that Google had, and it's what they're most well known for. And it seems like they kind of aren't paying attention to it at the moment. But that's more anecdotal. That's not really, don't mean anything by that other than curious to know if your experience has been the same. Not really kind of trusting Google search results anymore. Meta, all right, looking really good, letting off some of the steam, as I said, to just coming back down to these highs here. A little bit further will not do these markets any harm, and it would be great to see them do that and then finish with a nice green candle in April, which would give us some good buying opportunities. So that's really what I'm looking for in this week, to see if we can get back up above these 50-period moving averages. So you can see buying coming in immediately here. It really is, but also noticing here that the MACD is starting to cross the this central line here, which usually means it's actually heading into bearish territory. I'm seeing that for a few of these, which usually means it's just starting to get bearish. So that's interesting, but I'm not going to say it's conclusive yet. Really want to see how we finish the week. So, for example, if we do manage to close back up above those levels, that's a good sign for the bulls. If we fail to do that, to be closed lower, obviously that hints at further downside when you start to add it all together. Tesla here showing a couple of weeks of not really heading much lower. Almost certainly how I would expect it to do a bit of a move up towards potentially even as high as 300 is a possibility here. But again, I want to see how it behaves with that 50-period moving average. Does it bump its head up immediately into this area 272? That's what I have here for resistance, and we'll see how that plays out. Netflix, again, also attempting to push a little bit higher here. Excuse me. Overall, that monthly, you can see here, very reluctant to let off some of that buying pressure. Where was September over here? August, September. Didn't even slow down here. It just kept going. So currently, Netflix just performing incredibly well out of the Mag 7. Having been dismissed so many times in the past, it just continues to do incredibly well. All right. So ladies and gents, just to recap, they're really monitoring that weekly chart to see how price performs against that 50-period moving average this week, to see if we ultimately do close high. I am expecting a slightly stronger dollar. And I'm expecting a bit of a move higher on the markets. The question really is, how will they finish? Will they finish much higher, or will they do a move higher in the start of the week and then pull back a bit? But again, also just reminding you guys that the day trading stuff has been, the markets have been incredibly choppy. All the currency pairs, the crosses, everything have just been garbage for about the last 5-10 days. So if you've had a higher number than average of losing trades, or you found that they just aren't moving towards their targets, that is why. But it indicates and underscores how much uncertainty is in the markets at the moment. All right, that being said, have a great week. Thank you.